My daughter-in-law took my bedroom and said, "It's ours now," and the house went so quiet I could hear the oven clock breathing. That was October 3rd. Columbus, Ohio, the first cold snap that makes the porch rail sting your palm. She set her white handbag on my late wife's pillow, like planting a flag, and my son, Evan, stared at the floorboards as if the wood might argue for me. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. I was still in my flannel, the red one my wife used to call my Sunday shirt, carrying 2 mugs of tea I'd made out of Reflex. Sierra waved a paint sample card in the air. "We'll start with the master," she said, already calling it theirs. A man I didn't know rolled a tray of eggshell paint down the hall and glanced at me like I was blocking a hallway in a hotel. "It'll feel grown up," Sierra added, tapping the old cedar chest with her boot. That chest had held my wife's winter scarves for 37 years. It groaned across the floor like a wounded thing, while the oven timer dinged in the kitchen for no reason at all. "Dad, the study will be more comfortable for you," Evan said. "Soft, the way you speak to a nap you don't plan to honor." He took my keys from the dish by the door, just while we unload, and I watched them vanish into his pocket. I didn't argue. I walked into the study and made the cot, muscle memory guiding my hands the way habit saves a man when pride fails him. By dusk, I found the first proof of what they had already decided without me. A crumpled receipt lay on the kitchen counter, spotted with something sticky. Deposit $2,800, Jared Reno in rounded, cheerful handwriting. Not mine, not any contractor I'd ever hired. I slipped it into the top drawer by the stove and underlined the date on my wall calendar, OCT3, with the stub of a pencil. The way a man underlines the beginning of a war, he wants to win politely. Sierra filmed a video in the doorway. "Headboard arrives by month's end," as if my life had just become a set. The doorbell camera I'd installed after my wife passed caught a delivery scout snapping a photo of my front steps, angling to see how close a truck could get. The word "ours" followed Sierra like perfume. Our chandelier, our suite, our bathroom next. She said it to her phone, to her friends, to my son. She never said it to me. I tried once. "That's your mother's room," I told Evan, tasting the words like aspirin you swallow dry. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "She'd want us comfortable," he said, which was a sentence I recognized, not his words, but his fear wearing Sierra's coat. I set both mugs of tea on the kitchen table and watched the steam die. The oven timer ticked to itself, a little metronome for an empty song. That night, I moved my shaving kit to the study bathroom and heard the drill bite into the master wall, long screws going into fresh anchors, the kind you install when you plan to stay. On my way back down the hall, I saw the cedar chest parked beside Sierra's SUV, its lid tied with yellow twine. Mrs. Klein from next door, out with her terrier, paused by the sidewalk and gave me a look people give when they see a man carrying furniture he didn't agree to carry. I raised a hand. She raised a brow. Later, under the thin study blanket, I texted my son, "We need boundaries." 3 dots blinked, stopped, started again. "We'll talk after the paint dries," he wrote. I stared at that sentence until the letters blurred and the oven timer clicked over to midnight. Then I opened a new notebook, printed a label for its spine, boundaries, and wrote the first entry, OCT3, bedroom taken, $2,800 deposit I didn't authorize. I underlined it twice, because some nights a man has to borrow courage from a straight line. The first bill that made my stomach drop didn't arrive like a hammer. It slid in like junk mail. October 29th, I came in from raking a crust of red maple leaves and found an Ashley furniture statement leaned against the fruit bowl. $3,319 for a tufted headboard I had never lain my head against. Shipping, home delivery, Columbus. The paper even smiled at me with a financing offer. The way a pickpocket might pat your shoulder after taking your wallet. I set it flat, pressed a palm over the numbers until the paper warmed under my skin, and felt the house tilt. I cancelled the card October 30th and spent an afternoon on hold, listening to stale jazz that made the kitchen feel like a long elevator. The agent read back recent charges like autopsy findings. Headboard, chandelier, 489, paint supplies, food deliveries to my own address. "Was that you, sir?" she asked. "It was my card," I said. After we shut it down, the quiet felt like winter coming faster. I slid the $3,899 statement into the top drawer with the $2,800 crumpled receipt. The drawer shut with a small wooden breath that sounded like it was trying not to cry. My wife's jewelry box sat on the dresser in the study. Wrong place, wrong light. I opened it to check nothing had been disturbed. Everything had empty velvet grooves. The pearls that had sat there since 1989 were gone, and the navy cushion showed darker where they used to rest, like a tan line on a neck that had known better weather. I stood there long enough for the hallway nightlight to click off. "We boxed it," Sierra called from the master, as if kindness could be outsourced. She didn't bring a box. I ate beef stew I'd thawed for 2 mouths, then 3, now 1, at the narrow end of the dining table. The chairs made a half moon around an absence. Somewhere in the house, a drill whined, then stopped, like someone tugging on a memory and deciding it wasn't theirs. I tried again with my son. I stood at the open doorway to the master, knuckled the frame, the way I used to knock on his bedroom when he was little. "Ev," I said, "your mother's room." He didn't turn. "She'd want us comfortable," he repeated, softer this time, like a line he'd been given that no longer fit. Sierra lifted her phone without looking at me and narrated to an invisible crowd. "Our suite is finally coming together." The word "our" hit me harder than the drill. That night, I slept on the study cot, thin blanket catching on my socks, the oven timer ticking in the next room like a metronome for a song I didn't know how to sing. At 7:16 a.m., my phone pinged with a Venmo request, 900, paint guy. The memo had a roller emoji. I stared until the digits doubled. I rejected it and took a picture of the screen before it disappeared, my thumb trembling enough to blur the bottom corner. I printed the photo and wrote the time in the margin. It steadied me to write. Writing was a handle. I walked the length of the hallway and touched the door jamb to the master with 2 fingers, the way a man checks if a stove is hot. The hinge pins were shiny, new ones, seated with a carefulness that told me someone knew tools. Long screws, deep anchors, plans. Sierra had placed a woven throw over the footboard. It was the same grey as a storm that won't quite come. I backed away. Outside, Mrs. Klein was already out with her terrier, the leash looped around her wrist like a bracelet she forgot to remove. She'd been across that sidewalk for 23 years. She'd brought banana bread when my wife came home from gallbladder surgery and stood guard over our mailbox when the city mixed our street with one a mile away. Now she looked at the SUV in my drive and the cedar chest strapped behind the back seat. "Want me to say something?" she asked without saying the word police or son or theft. "Not yet," I said. "Would you write down what you see? Just dates, times." "For me?" She nodded like we had just shared the world's quietest oath. I tried to do the same for myself. I wrote in the notebook OCT 30, cancelled card. OCT 31, jewelry box empty. Note to self, ask calmly, do not accuse. I underlined do not accuse, as if the underlines could hold back the words behind my teeth. Halloween night came and went, with 2 small packs of kids and a teenage boy dressed like a broken phone. He carried a sign that read, "Low battery." I gave him 2 Snickers and wanted to ask where he'd found a costume that fit me so well. Later, through the door, I heard Sierra laugh the way people laugh when a joke isn't funny, but the power is real. "By Christmas," she said to whatever friend lives inside her screen, "this house will look like adults live here." I put the kettle on, forgot to pour the water, and stood by the window until the porch light timed itself off. November 1st. Mrs. Klein texted me. They moved the chest at 7:42 p.m. into the white SUV. Driver had a ball cap. She directed him. I saved the text, printed it, and slipped it into a plastic sleeve the way my wife used to slip recipes between wax paper sheets. I added a new tab to the notebook, Evidence. The tab stuck out like a tongue I couldn't take back. I called my nephew Marcus that evening. He's the kind of man who labels his phone charger. When he was 6, he'd ask me for the broken clocks in my garage so he could line up the gears. Now his voice was a clean blade. "Uncle," he said, "grief is loud. Let me help you turn it into a list." He texted me 3 lines that felt like a handrail. Get counsel. Inventory. Breathe. He asked me for photographs. The empty jewelry box. The receipt. The headboard statement. I took each one in the light by the sink with the good bulb and sent them. He replied with a thumbs up and a file name I didn't need to know, because he knows I can't think in clouds. Late that night, Sierra's laughter thinned and stopped. Evan's footsteps came down the hall, paused outside the study, then kept going to the kitchen. The refrigerator door opened, closed. He stood in the doorway and looked at me, the way grown children look at a parent. They're afraid of disappointing and need to disappoint anyway. "Dad," he said, "we'll figure it out." He meant we like a bridge that didn't reach my shore. "When?" I asked, and he looked at the old shotgun clock above the pantry, as if time could forgive him. "After the paint dries," he said again, and the oven timer, almost mockingly, clicked over to midnight as if to mark the end of that sentence. On November 2nd, I did something that felt small and treasonous to my past. I looked up elder law attorneys in Columbus and found a photograph of a man with kind eyebrows and a desk that wasn't trying to impress anyone. "Mr. Patel, Saturday consult, Nov 8, 11 a.m. I wrote it into the notebook, underlined it once, then twice. I didn't tell Evan, I didn't tell Sierra. I told the oven timer by pressing its button once to make sure it still had a voice. It beeped back. Good. Someone in this house would answer when spoken to. When I woke on November 3rd, frost framed the windows like white lace, the kind my wife used to tape to the kitchen panes every winter. I made coffee, poured it into her chipped mug with the small blue sparrow on it, and opened my notebook. The word "boundaries on the spine" looked steadier than I felt. I spent the morning gathering what I had, the $2,800 renovation deposit receipt, folded tight. The $3,099 furniture statement. The Venmo screenshot for $900. The text from Mrs. Klein, photos of my wife's empty jewelry box. Each piece sat in its own clear sleeve like evidence in a kindness trial. I didn't know the law, but I knew how to keep things tidy. By November 8th, I walked into Mr. Patel's office, downtown Columbus. The place smelled of paper and peppermint tea, a clean scent that meant order. I laid the folder on his desk, and for a second I thought my hands would shake. He flipped through each page, quiet and deliberate. "So, you let them move in temporarily," he said, "and now they've claimed the master bedroom." I nodded. "They said it's theirs now. Do you have ownership documents?" I slid over the mortgage release letter from 2012, the one with my name only, my wife's signature beneath, before she passed. He looked at it, then at me. "That house is yours, Mr. Harper, 100%. What you need isn't anger. It's paper. Paper wins." He told me about the revocable living trust, a way to protect the house so that no one could claim it, refinance it, or even use it for credit without my signature. "You can transfer the deed into the trust quietly," he said. "When you're ready, you show them the certificate calmly." "Calmly," I repeated. The word felt heavier than a lock. He leaned forward. "You can't change the locks yet. They're tenants by occupancy, even if informal. Serve a written notice after the holidays. But you can collect your evidence now. Recordings, receipts, communications." He tapped the notebook. "Start logging time, dates, tone. And if you want a witness moment, Thanksgiving or Christmas works. Family present. No yelling. Truth reads better when it's spoken at a dinner table." I left his office with a yellow folder labeled "Options" and a single sentence in my head. Paper wins. Back home, I sat at the kitchen table and opened the folder again, tracing the word trust. I bought a small USB voice recorder online, same-day delivery. When it arrived, I hid it in the linen closet between towels. Red light blinking once like a heartbeat. That night, around 9:18 p.m., I caught the first clear recording, Sierra's voice on speakerphone, drifting down the hall. "By December we'll refinance in our name," she said. "Old houses don't fight back." I froze in the hallway. The phrase "old houses don't fight back" burned into me. I emailed the file to myself and to Marcus, my nephew. He texted back one word: logged. On November 9th, I installed a doorbell camera by the back door. When Sierra asked why, I smiled and said, "Porch pirates." She didn't ask what kind. By November 10th, the notebook had 4 tabs: receipts, recordings, legal, plan under plan. I wrote 3 dates: Deck 2, appraisal; Deck 10, trust funding; Deck 24, dinner. The last one I circled twice. At the grocery store that afternoon, I saw the holiday aisle already stacked with cranberry sauce and foil pans. I picked up 2. The cashier asked if I was hosting. "Just a small dinner," I said. Truth and turkey. When I got home, I found Sierra rearranging the living room, my wife's photos down, new throw pillows up. She smiled over her shoulder. "Getting ready for the holidays?" "It's good we're settled." "Settled," I echoed, the word catching like a splinter. That night I sat by the oven, notebook open, timer ticking. I whispered to my wife's photo propped against the flower jar, "Christmas Eve, love." "That's when we'll end this politely." The timer dinged once. Soft, perfect timing. By November 11th, the air had that metallic chill that bites the back of your throat. The leaves were gone. The streetlights came on early, and my house, was glowing warm from windows that no longer felt like mine. Sierra had hung sheer curtains in the master that fluttered in the draft. She'd even placed one of those eucalyptus wreaths on the door, the kind she saw in her influencer videos. I let her have her stage. Mine was still being built, quietly, one receipt at a time. I started with the spare key. I'd hidden it years ago behind the downspout under the lilac bush. I retrieved it, photographed it in my palm, and slid it into my pocket, not for intrusion, but for inventory. When you've been robbed of peace in your own home, you learn to document your breath. The following days, I walked the perimeter like a man memorizing a crime scene. I photographed the before and after of the master bedroom, my wife's floral wallpaper covered with grey paint, her framed cross-stitch reading, "Love is patient," replaced by a faux marble mirror. I printed 2 copies, one for Mr. Patel, one for my binder. November 16th. Sierra posted a video of the Our Chandelier install. The timestamp was clear, and the caption proud: "Finally grown up living." The chandelier receipt, $489, was sitting on my printer, billed to the same card I'd cancelled 2 weeks ago. I stapled them together, post and proof, and labeled it Fraud Sequence A. That same night I received a message from the bank's fraud division confirming my affidavit had been processed. "If further charges appear, we can freeze the linked account." The phrase "linked account" hit hard. Evan's name was still attached to my emergency savings, the one my wife and I set up before his wedding. I made a note to remove him once the trust was active. By November 21st, I met with Mr. Patel again. His office heater hummed low, and the blinds filtered the grey light like courtroom shade. He handed me a draft of the trust document, and on top of it, an occupancy agreement, legalese that turned any guest into a paying tenant once the calendar turned over. "They can't claim to be family and tenants both," he said. "You'll have your leverage." We went over the plan like generals before a battle. He suggested recording the dinner, but not hidden, simply a phone on the table for memories, if anyone asked. "Serve the truth, not vengeance," he reminded me. Revenge is justice done slowly. At home that evening I tested my tools. I slid the USB recorder under the linen runner at the dining table, the one Sierra hadn't replaced yet. When the oven timer dinged, I pressed play and listened to its crisp click. The sound was sharp, satisfying. QI practiced the scene alone, setting the table, placing folded envelopes under each plate. I even said it aloud once. "Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from." It was absurdly out of place in my kitchen, but somehow fitting. I was rehearsing for an audience, an invisible one that would understand the meaning of quiet. Lawful revenge, November 22nd. The fraud report came through. Total unauthorized charges, 6,388. I took the paper, folded it once and slid it behind the trust draft. Proof of motive, proof of theft. The next day, I walked over to Mrs. Klein's porch with a jar of her own jam I'd been saving. I told her I might need a witness at Christmas, just to confirm timing, not confrontation. She nodded, eyes sharp behind her glasses. Honey, I've seen 40 years of people thinking free rent comes with love. You do what you have to do. November 25th. Sierra's Instagram showed holiday table test run, my wife's antique dishes gleaming under her filters. I noticed the head of the table, my seat, set with her wine glass, her manicured hand in frame. That image went into my file, labeled psychological possession evidence, November 28th. I sent Ruth, the process server, a message confirming Christmas Eve at 6 p.m. She replied, "Understood. Document served, camera worn." Efficient. That night I sat in the study, listening to the new chandelier hum faintly from the master. Evan walked in, rubbing the back of his neck. "Dad," he said, "I know this is weird, but she's trying to make a home." I looked up. "Son, a home doesn't come from a receipt. It comes from permission." He blinked unsteady and left without replying. The oven timer clicked softly beside me, marking the beat between now and Christmas, November 30th. I wrote the final word in my notebook before closing it. Dinner, deck 24, proof, not pain. And for the first time since October, I slept through the night because the plan, quiet and lawful, was now alive. November 21st to December 1st, Thanksgiving arrived under grey skies, the kind that make everything feel like it's holding its breath. I set the dining table myself, ironic since Sierra had taken charge of hosting this year. She swept in wearing an apron that said Queen of the Kitchen, a slogan that felt more like a warning. Evan followed with 2 grocery bags, looking like he wanted to disappear inside one of them. I watched her command the room as though she'd built it. "We'll seat Dad here," she said, pointing to the far end of the table. "Not the head, never the head." I smiled, polite, and let her. I was saving my voice for the right time. The oven timer dinged as we sat down for grace. Sierra rolled her eyes and said, "You and that old clock, Dad. It's haunting us." "Maybe it's keeping time," I said. She didn't hear the difference. Dinner was civil, even pleasant on the surface. Sierra laughed too loud, complimented her own stuffing, and posted a selfie mid-toast with the caption, "Our first holiday in our forever home." I caught the reflection in her phone screen, my own face in the background, blurred, already erased. After pie, she told my sister, "We're doing the bathroom next." January project. She showed her Pinterest board labeled Our Master Bath 2025. I watched the tiles scroll by on the screen and realized she had already planned February too. My sister glanced at me, but I just smiled. I didn't need to raise my voice. My receipts would do that for me later. When everyone left, I washed the dishes alone. The oven timer clicked in slow rhythm as I set each plate to dry. That sound, steady, exact, became my calm heartbeat. Sierra posted one more photo that night. My wife's old china glistening under her caption, "Blessed Taos our house." I printed it and slid it into the yellow folder. Evidence always needs context, and arrogance was the best kind. November 28th. The house had grown quieter. Too quiet. Evan's voice lost its warmth. Sierra's tone sharpened into commands. That night, just before midnight, my phone buzzed with a voicemail. I pressed play and heard Sierra's voice talking to someone. "He's sentimental but harmless. He won't fight back. He just writes everything down like it matters." Her laughter faded into the hum of the refrigerator. I saved the message and forwarded it to Marcus. My nephew replied with 2 words, "Underestimate me." The next morning, I added a new label to the notebook, Psychological Files. I filled that section with the kind of proof that doesn't fit in court but speaks loud in life. Screenshots of captions, timestamps, the tone of her texts. The facade of family can be shattered by one pattern if you know where to look. By the weekend, I'd finished setting the stage for December 24th. I ordered thick ivory cardstock and printed elegant place cards, one for each guest, including Sierra's parents. I wrote their names in calligraphy, calm hand, steady line. Under each card, I planned to tape a copy of the trust certificate and occupancy agreement Mr. Patel had finalized. They wouldn't see them until I said grace. On December 2nd, the appraiser came. His clipboard gleamed like a badge of reason. "Nice home," he said. "Worth around $312,000, maybe a bit more if updated." I smiled. Sierra would have loved to hear that. She wouldn't. The trust recorded officially on December 10th. The county sent a confirmation letter in a manila envelope, stamped, filed, and recorded. I framed that envelope between two sheets of plastic like a relic and stored it in my safe. That sound, the latch clicking shut, was the best sound I'd heard in months. The oven timer dinged that night, right at 8 p.m., same as always. I took it as a sign. Everything was aligned, down to the minute. Later, from the hall, I overheard Sierra humming to herself, folding laundry in the master. Her voice was sugar and steel. "By Christmas," she told Evan, "it'll all be official." I stood outside the door, not entering, just listening to the weight of her words. "Yes," I whispered back, so quiet it was almost a prayer. "By Christmas, it'll be official." When I turned away, I felt no anger, just precision. Every insult had been measured, recorded, time-stamped. And now the clock, my old oven clock, was counting down not to dinner, but to truth. The holiday lights flickered through the frosted window, and I caught my reflection in the glass. I looked older, yes, but sharper too, like a man who'd finally remembered his own name. It was almost December, and every quiet tick in that kitchen was a promise waiting to be kept. By December 12th, the house had started to smell like pine needles and new paint, a strange mix of tradition and trespass. The tree Sierra picked was too big for the living room. It scraped the ceiling fan each time it turned. She laughed, said it gave charm, and Evan smiled the way men smile when they've already given up arguing. I watched them decorate from the doorway, silent. My wife and I used to hang one single glass dove at the top every year. Sierra replaced it with a glittered letter S. The dove stayed in its box that year. Some symbols deserve to sleep until justice wakes them. December 14th, I found the first real piece of arrogance that sealed her fate. On the kitchen counter sat a refinance packet. No bank letterhead, no signatures, just a quitclaim deed template with a sticky note in Sierra's handwriting. "Sign here to protect us." The handwriting was casual, but the intent wasn't. I took a photo of it on my phone. Timestamp clear, Deck 14, 4:07 p.m., and sent it to Mr. Patel with one line. "Next move?" He called within 10 minutes. "Do not sign. Bring that to dinner." His voice was calm, measured. "Let them walk into their own trap. You have all the proof you need, the trust, the recordings, and now intent. Intent." The word rang through the house like a sermon bell. That night, I noticed something else missing, the small velvet pouch that used to hold my wife's pearl earrings. I hadn't seen it since early October. It wasn't in the jewelry box. I searched the dresser, the drawers, the safe. Gone. 3 days later, December 18th, I got my answer. Mrs. Klein texted me a screenshot of a Facebook marketplace listing. A pair of pearl earrings, antique set, identical to my wife's. The seller. "Trina S., Sierra's cousin. I called Marcus immediately. Can we get them back?" He said, "Leave it to me." That evening, I drove to Kroger on Main Street, parking near the yellow light post. Marcus was already there, wearing his work jacket. Trina arrived 5 minutes later, nervous smile, holding the pouch. Marcus handed her $200 cash, exactly what she'd asked for online. Mrs. Klein filmed discreetly from her car, time-stamped, dated. When we got home, I placed the pouch in the center of the dining table, opened it, and let the pearls roll onto the runner. They gleamed under the chandelier Sierra had installed, my wife's pearls, returned from the digital pawnshop of deceit. Placed them carefully into a new box and set it under the centerpiece, a reminder that truth would sit at this table too. December 20th, Sierra rehearsed her story for someone on the phone. I heard her from the hallway. "If he gets weird, we'll say we were just helping. It's family." Her confidence was surgical, like she'd practiced guilt removal. Evan, quieter now, tried to make peace. "Dad, about Christmas Eve," he said that night. "Can we keep it simple?" "Just family." "Of course," I said. "Just family." He didn't ask who else I'd invited. He didn't ask about the yellow folder or the envelopes under each plate. By December 22nd, the doorbell camera caught Sierra standing in the driveway, rehearsing lines again. Hands moving like an actress. "We live here. It's ours now." Her tone was triumphant. I almost admired her nerve. Almost. The appraisal report had come through by then. $312,000 confirmed. The trust certificate recorded on December 10th was solid. The house legally belonged to the trust, not to me, and certainly not to them. That meant no refinance could touch it. Sierra's scheme had died before she even tried. Still, I wanted witnesses. I invited her parents to dinner. I worded the message sweetly. "Please join us for Christmas Eve supper. It'll be a night of gratitude and new beginnings." That night, I placed the recovered pearls back in their pouch, slipped it into a small red box, and tied it with a gold ribbon. It sat under the tree, a perfect symbol of what had been stolen and found. I spent December 23rd in preparation. Every plate, every envelope, every piece of paper was in its place. 8 printed photos. The master bedroom before and after. The 300 headboard statement. The 2,800 renovation receipt. The 900 Venmo request. The pearl listing. The trust certificate. The quitclaim deed. I lined them up in order of betrayal, like chapters of a book that was about to end. That night, I stood by the oven and listened to the timer's steady click. My hand rested on the yellow folder. Tomorrow everything would be public, clean, final. Sierra thought she'd written the story of our family's new era. She had no idea the final chapter had already been typed and scheduled to print at dinner, December 24th, 6 p.m. The Christmas Eve. The snow fell in slow, deliberate flakes, like God himself was waiting for me to make the first move. Inside, the dining table gleamed under Sierra's chandelier, the centerpiece of her forever home. Candles flickered along the runner I'd chosen carefully, the one hiding the small recorder underneath. The oven timer ticked softly in the background, keeping time with my pulse. I heard their laughter before I saw them. Sierra's voice was bright, forced, almost trembling with excitement. She was dressed in silver, as if she already owned the house and the season. Evan trailed behind, his tie crooked, eyes heavy. They brought Sierra's parents this year, something she insisted on. I'd encouraged it. A good audience always makes justice sound clearer. "Dad," Sierra said, sweeping in like a hostess, "doesn't it look wonderful? I wanted this to be the kind of Christmas your wife would have loved." I nodded slowly. "I'm sure she's watching," I said. She never missed a family performance. We sat. I took the head chair this time. No one argued. Sierra smiled too wide. "Of course you sit there," she said, pretending grace. "It's your house." My fork paused mid-air. "Yes," I said softly. "It is." Grace came first. I bowed my head and spoke steady, every word a match waiting to strike. "Lord, we thank you for this home, for truth, and for the strength to protect what we're given." Then I added, "and for the courage to sit at a table and face what's real." The oven timer dinged. Right on cue, I lifted the table runner and clicked the recorder so that it played Sierra's own voice, clear, crisp, and undeniable. "By December, we'll refinance in our name. Old houses don't fight back." The room went still. You could hear the tick of the wall clock and the slow creak of the floor under someone's shifting feet. Sierra's father blinked, confused. "What's that?" I smiled. "A recording from November 9th, 9:18 p.m. Thought it might help clarify tonight's discussion. Sierra's hand froze on her napkin. You recorded me?" "I recorded my house," I said calmly. "It tends to speak when I'm not in the room." Her mother's fork clattered. Evan's jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. I reached under the centerpiece and pulled out the small red box, the one holding my wife's pearls. "Merry Christmas," I said, sliding it to Sierra. "You might remember these. I had to buy them back from your cousin, Trina. December 18th, 6:05 p.m., Kroger parking lot. 200 in cash. Mrs. Klein filmed it. I thought you'd like a keepsake." The blood drained from her face. That's not— Her father leaned forward. Trina, what is he talking about? I didn't let her finish. I set the quitclaim deed on the table, the one she'd left on my counter with "Sign here to protect us" written in her perfect script. You left this for me, I said, sliding it next to her wine glass. No letterhead, no lender, just your handwriting. That's forgery, Sierra. If I'd signed, it would have transferred my deed directly into your names. But you were too impatient to check the records first. I reached under my chair and pulled out the yellow folder. Because on December 10th, this house was placed into a revocable living trust, recorded, certified, sealed. Every brick, every screw, every inch belongs to the Harper Family Trust, and I'm the trustee. My successor trustee, I gestured to Marcus, sitting quietly near the end, already holds copies, meaning even if I drop dead at this table, not 1 inch of this home passes to you. Sierra's mother's hand went to her mouth. Sierra. Evan whispered, Dad, what are you doing? Finishing dinner, I said, and starting peace. I tapped the bottom of each plate one by one. Under each of your place settings, I said, you'll find a copy of the trust certificate and the occupancy agreement Mr. Patel drew up. It states that as of January 1st, any guest in this home without my consent pays a $1,150 market rent per month. If they decline, they vacate within 30 days. Sierra snatched her plate up. The paper stared back at her, her name in neat legal font. You can't do this, she snapped. I already did, I said. And if you stay, you'll pay taxes on my roof. Not much of a bargain, is it? The timer dinged again. This time the front doorbell chimed along with it. Evan stood. I'll get it, he muttered, but I was already moving. I opened the door to find Ruth, the process server, standing in her navy coat, snow on her shoulders. Evening, Mr. Harper, she said. As requested, delivery for Evan and Sierra Harper. She stepped in, precise and calm, and handed 2 envelopes across the threshold. 30-day notice to vacate and small claims complaint for conversion of personal items, including recorded evidence and financial statements. Sierra's father rose halfway out of his chair. Conversion? You mean theft? That's the term the law uses, Ruth said. Merry Christmas. The silence that followed wasn't quiet, it roared. Evan looked from me to Sierra, then back again. His face had that look I'd seen once when he was 12 and broke my truck window. Disbelief that the damage was real. Sierra tried to stand, then sat again. This is harassment. I picked up my wine glass, steady hand, steady tone. No, this is documentation. You wanted adults to live here. Welcome to adult consequences. Evan rubbed his temples. Dad, can we talk alone? Tomorrow, I said gently. When you're ready to speak as a son, not a squatter. No one moved for a long time. The candles dripped wax in slow tears. The pearls, still shining between us, caught the flicker of light and threw it back, proof that some things, when returned, shine even harder. Ruth nodded politely, turned and left, her bootprints filling with snow as the door closed behind her. I poured coffee into the 2 mugs my wife and I used every Christmas Eve. Dessert's ready, I said to no one in particular. Truth always tastes better when it's hot. Sierra's parents stood first. We'll be leaving, her father said stiffly. Take your daughter, I said quietly. Leave my son the space to remember who he is. Evan didn't move. His eyes stayed on the pearls. I looked at him one last time, the way fathers do when they see both the boy they raised and the man he became, standing in the same shadow. Merry Christmas, son, I said. Next year, bring peace instead of paint. The oven timer dinged again, one last clear note before I reached over and turned it off. Dinner was served. Justice, too. The morning after the dinner, the house was quiet again, eerily, beautifully quiet. I woke before sunrise, brewed coffee, and stood in the doorway of the master bedroom. The chandelier Sierra had installed was still swinging faintly, like the echo of her arrogance. The bed was unmade, the pillows dented. A small perfume bottle left on the nightstand, like a surrender flag. For the first time in months, I wasn't angry. Just empty, in the way a field feels after harvest. By mid-morning, the moving started. Sierra and her parents whispered in the hallway, boxes sliding over hardwood. Evan avoided my eyes, but he didn't argue. They taped up the headboard she'd bragged about online and carried it through the snow like a coffin. When the front door finally shut behind them, I stood at the window and watched her white SUV pull out of the driveway. Mrs. Klein's terrier barked once, as if to punctuate the moment. Sierra posted on Facebook that evening, "Smear campaign. Pray for us." She never mentioned the notice or the pearls or the court filing, but she knew better than to test me now. I didn't respond. Silence is what you give people who mistake your kindness for permission. December 26th, Mr. Patel filed the small claim suit for conversion and misuse of funds. Attached were every receipt, every photograph, every timestamp I'd gathered since October. He called to tell me the clerk had raised an eyebrow at the thoroughness. "You could teach a class," he said. I told him I already had, just not the kind taught in schools. We also sent a written demand for the cedar chest. Sierra's cousin dropped it off 2 days later, December 28th, still tied with the same yellow twine she'd used to drag it away months ago. The chest had a small dent on one corner, but otherwise it was whole. I ran my hand along the wood grain and whispered, "You made it home." That evening I sat on the study cot for what I knew would be the last time. The air smelled of dust and peppermint tea. I looked at the notebook, Boundaries, now swollen with pages, each one a small victory written in pencil and patience. At 8:37 p.m. there was a knock. Evan stood in the doorway, shoulders slumped, eyes red. He looked more like a man who'd lost a compass than a son who'd lost a plan. "Dad," he said, "I messed up. I didn't move. I just waited. I didn't know about the deed," he continued, voice cracking. "She told me it was about refinancing, making things secure. You should have read," I interrupted softly. "That's all. You should have read," he nodded, silent tears cutting down his face. "She's staying with her parents. I don't know what comes next." "Paperwork," I said. "That's what comes next." I pulled out the occupancy agreement Mr. Patel had drafted weeks ago. "If you need a place to stay until you get back on your feet, sign this. Guest room only. Rent covers the property tax and utilities. Clear terms. Clean slate." He hesitated, then signed. His hand shook, but the ink dried steady. For the first time in months, he looked relieved. "Thanks, Dad." I smiled faintly. "Don't thank me. Thank the oven timer. It kept us both honest." The next few days passed in quiet repair. I replaced the bedroom curtains with the old ones. My wife's lace panels, slightly yellowed but warm. I polished the cedar chest, returned the pearls to their rightful box, and locked both inside the closet. The house began to breathe again, slower, steadier, like an old heart finding rhythm. December 30th. Evan came home from work carrying 2 small grocery bags and a Christmas card. Inside was a note that read, "Thanks for not giving up on me." He signed his name like a boy again. We ate stew together that night in silence, the good kind, the kind that means there's nothing left to argue about. December 31st. As the city prepared for fireworks, I fixed the hinge pin I'd removed from the master door weeks earlier, the one I'd taken out so Sierra's forever home would never quite close properly. When the pin slid back into place, I felt the house settle, as if it sighed in relief. I set the oven timer for midnight, not to cook, but to listen. When it dinged, I whispered, "We made it." Outside, the fireworks began. Inside, peace did. The next morning, I started a new notebook. The label on its spine read, "Peace." Jan 1. The courthouse in downtown Columbus was colder than the weather outside. Long marble floors, metal detector hum, the faint scent of sanitizer and coffee. Justice never smells sweet, it smells clean. I took a seat on the hard wooden bench, yellow folder in my lap, and waited for my name to be called. When the bailiff said, "Harper v. Harper," I stood up, every step deliberate. Sierra was already there, sitting beside a public attorney she'd hired last minute. She was dressed in cream, like the color itself might buy forgiveness. Evan sat 2 rows behind her alone. He didn't look at me, but his presence said enough. The magistrate was a woman in her 50s, glasses hanging from a silver chain. She looked like she'd seen every kind of family war. She smiled politely, then frowned at the file size when the clerk handed it over. "Mr. Harper," she said, "this is quite a record." "I'm a man who believes in receipts, Your Honor," I said. The court chuckled softly. Even the clerk couldn't help it. I presented each piece exactly as I had rehearsed with Mr. Patel. The $2,800 renovation deposit receipt, signed by Sierra's contractor. The $399 furniture statement. The $900 Venmo request, printed and time-stamped. Screenshots of the Facebook Marketplace Pearl listing. Mrs. Klein's witness statement and video clip from December 18th, 6:05 p.m. The recorded call with Sierra saying, "Old houses don't fight back." The magistrate raised a hand halfway through. "That's sufficient, Mr. Harper. You've proven conversion of personal property, unauthorized charges, and an attempted deed transfer. You've done my job for me." Sierra's attorney leaned forward. "My client acted under the belief she was authorized as a family member." The magistrate cut him off. "A belief isn't ownership. Not in Ohio." She turned to Sierra. "Mrs. Harper, did you obtain permission, written or verbal, to make these purchases or attempt to alter deed documentation?" Sierra swallowed hard. "And we were trying to help him modernize the home." The judge's eyebrows lifted. "By transferring it out of his name?" Her silence answered for her. Then came the part I hadn't expected. The magistrate looked at Evan and said, "You're the son, yes?" He nodded. "Family doesn't mean you erase boundaries. It means you honor them." Her gavel tapped once. "Judgment in favor of Mr. Harper. Restitution awarded for property loss, court costs, and legal fees. Additionally, the attempted deed transfer will be noted with the county clerk's office. This court recommends counseling before further family contact." The sound of that gavel wasn't loud, but it landed like thunder. Sierra's face went still, not angry, just hollow. She stood abruptly, muttered something to her attorney, and walked out. The pearls flashed once under the courthouse light as she passed, still on her ears, though the originals were safe at home. Evan started to follow her, then stopped. His eyes met mine for the first time in months. He whispered, "She's leaving." "For good," I nodded. "Let her." Back in the hallway, Mr. Patel clapped me on the shoulder. "You handled it perfectly," he said. "Most people come to me too late. You came early enough to win on paper and in peace." We filed one last document that afternoon, a bar complaint against the so-called notary, whose stamp Sierra's cousin had forged on the quitclaim deed. Patel smiled. "He won't be notarizing anything else for a long time." As I left the courthouse, the wind cut through the parking lot sharp and clean. I didn't feel triumphant, just steady. Justice doesn't taste sweet. It tastes like breathing without weight on your chest. That night I came home to find Evan sitting in the kitchen, a mug of coffee steaming between his hands. "Dad," he said quietly, "I read through your binder. Every page." I smiled faintly. "Then you know how much silence costs." He nodded. "I want to start over. Somewhere smaller. But I'll visit. If you'll have me." "You don't need to ask," I said. Later, I placed the trust binder back in the safe, next to my wife's robe and the restored pearl box. The oven timer ticked softly beside me, no longer a countdown, just rhythm. The house, once invaded, now felt alive again, breathing, balanced. And for the first time in a long time, so did I. The house sounded different now. Even the floorboards had changed their rhythm. No sharp heels, no constant motion, just the slow, contented creak of age. I woke early, as I always did, and brewed coffee for 2 out of habit. My wife's cup sat beside mine on the counter. Steam curled above both. Though only one would be drunk, I took the cup into the master bedroom. The curtains, our curtains, hung open, lace edges breathing in the morning light. For months, this room had felt like a wound. Now it was a scar, visible but healed. I ran my hand along the cedar chest, its wood cool and smooth beneath my fingers, and whispered, "It's over." The chandelier Sierra installed still hung from the ceiling, a leftover monument to her ambition. I thought about taking it down, but then decided it could stay. Let it remind me that even bad choices can light a room if you know how to stand in the glow. I walked the hallway slowly, tracing every small repair. the patched holes where her mirror had been, the tiny nail still holding my wife's cross-stitch that read "Love is patient." She had stitched it 30 years ago, and for the first time, I finally understood what she meant. Patience isn't silence, it's preparation. Downstairs, the yellow folder still sat on the shelf where I'd left it. I opened it one last time, flipping through the documents that had once felt heavier than grief. Receipts, statements, the trust certificate, all the paper proof that quiet persistence beats chaos. Every line was a story of resistance told in ink. As I closed it, I realized revenge had never been the point. Justice had. Revenge feeds anger. Justice restores breath. I'd won not because I'd shouted the loudest, but because I'd stayed calm when the house around me stopped respecting me. Later that day, I took a walk down to Mrs. Klein's porch. Her terrier barked before I even stepped off the curb. She was trimming her rose bushes, humming under her breath. "Well," she said without looking up, "you did it." "Thanks to you," I said. "Your notes were gold in court," she chuckled. "Wasn't gold, just truth written down. People forget truth has a paper trail." We stood there a moment in the cold, two old souls with time on our side again. Before I left, she handed me a small envelope. Inside was a printed photo she'd taken from her window, the cedar chest being carried back into my house. "Figured you'd want proof of the day peace came home," she said. Back inside, I pinned that photo to my bulletin board beside the label from my first notebook, Boundaries. Then I opened the second notebook, Peace, and wrote the first entry. Justice isn't a loud victory. It's a quiet morning where the coffee stays warm, the house stays still, and the ghosts of what was wrong finally stop pacing the floor. That night, I sat at the table with 2 mugs of tea, one for me, one for the air beside me. It had become our ritual, mine and my wife's. I spoke softly, like she was still listening. "Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from." I smiled at my own foolishness. Maybe she would have laughed too. Around 9 p.m. my phone buzzed, a text from Evan. "Can we have dinner tomorrow?" "Just us." I stared at it for a moment, then replied, "Tomorrow at 10. Breakfast instead. Before bed I walked into the master and turned off the chandelier. The room dimmed to a soft golden hue. I stood at the window, watching the snow melt into the yard, and thought about all the men my age who still think silence is strength. It isn't. Strength is having the courage to speak once, clearly, and never need to repeat yourself again. I whispered to the dark, to her, to anyone still listening, "You didn't lose me, you gave me away." And I walked back, February 5th. The sun rose slow that morning, golden light spilling over the snow like forgiveness. I woke to the sound of the mail slot clinking. Just a letter, no knocks, no noise. Peace has a different rhythm. It doesn't announce itself, it just arrives and waits to be noticed. When I reached the hallway, Evan was already standing by the front door, a cardboard box at his feet. His breath fogged in the cold air leaking through the frame. "I was dropping this off," he said quietly. Inside the box were the last traces of Sierra's forever home. 2 grey velvet pillows, a diffuser labelled Linen Air that had never once touched linen, and a folded sheet of paper. He held it out to me, eyes lowered. "It's from me," he said. The paper was handwritten, shaky but deliberate. "Dad, I believed comfort could be borrowed. It can't. I let someone tell me that love meant ownership. I forgot where home came from. I'm sorry, he didn't sign it, Evan. He signed it, son." I folded the letter slowly, the way I used to fold his report cards before my wife saw the grades. "You know," I said, "you don't have to keep apologizing. You already signed the only paper that mattered, the new agreement." He gave a small, embarrassed smile. "It's just strange, paying rent in the house I grew up in." I poured 2 cups of coffee. "It's not rent," I said. "It's respect, something that holds better value." He nodded, taking the mug with both hands, and for the first time in months, we drank in silence that wasn't heavy. It was quiet the way peace is quiet, earned, not given. He stayed that week, sleeping in the guest room, coming home early from work, fixing the squeaky cabinet hinge without being asked. He didn't go near the master bedroom, but sometimes I caught him looking down the hall toward it, eyes soft, maybe remembering his mother humming while she folded laundry there. February 9th. He told me Sierra had filed for separation. She said I embarrassed her, he muttered. She said you stole Christmas, I smiled faintly. No, I said. I reclaimed it. We both laughed a little, the sound awkward but real. On February 10th, he packed to leave. I helped him load his things into his car. Before he got in, he said, "You were right about one thing." Which one? I asked. Paper wins. That night I came inside to the soft hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the oven timer, the heartbeat of my house. I walked to the study, opened the notebook titled Peace, and wrote one final line beneath the others. Even forgiveness needs proof. Mine came in ink and silence. Then I closed the cover for good. I stood in the master bedroom doorway, the chandelier still hanging overhead, catching the evening light. I didn't hate it anymore. It was just an object, a reminder that even what someone else meant for control can become decoration once you survive it. On the nightstand sat my wife's photograph, the edges curling slightly from years of sunlight. I set the folded letter from Evan beside it and whispered, "He's learning." The oven timer clicked in the kitchen, right on schedule. I didn't reset it. Some things don't need to count anymore. I sat on the edge of the bed, exhaled, and said aloud the final truth that had carried me through everything. You didn't lose me, you gave me away. And I walked back. Outside, the snow began again, slow, steady, unhurried. Inside, my house was finally still. Justice had come quietly. And in that quiet, I realized something deeper. Sometimes revenge isn't about payback at all. It's about reclaiming your name, your peace, and your right to close your own door.